Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams. This is my twice weekly webcast, and again have a fairly packed show for you today as we come up towards Christmas. I was going to put my Christmas hat on today to be festive, but I completely forgot to get it ready. Never mind. I'm sure you all know it's Christmas. We've had enough adverts and things on the news for the last month or so. So what do we have in today's show? Well, a unprovoked attack on a motorcyclist by a driver, apparently random, knocked him off and killed him, rather sadly. There's a new science-based guide to helping manufacturers make better motorcycle clothing. That preliminary copy of that has been released. It will be out fully next month. I'll talk more about that when it comes up. There is a new deal between Spanish transport authorities and the Barcelona City Council, which could result in the creation of motorcycle-only lanes. Uber have teamed up with RoadPeace to offer after-crash support. Triumph are working on E40 fuel for Moto 2, and they've also dropped a hint that electric bikes are on the way from the manufacturer. A Royal Enfield Bullet starts itself. I've got a video of that, which is rather amusing, but slightly unfortunate for the owner, of course. And if you can't afford one, you can always convert your own bike to electric power. I'll have a look at a scheme in Indonesia, which is getting underway. And Harley-Davidson's Chinese-built 350 and 500s are to start production. We've got a quick look at those as well. Now, finally, today's discussion point, we've finally reached the top 10 accidents. The number one spot is, of course, the collision with emerging vehicles. So stay tuned for that. That'll be at the end of the show. We have Clive, Christine and Kevin all looking a good morning to you all. Now, I'll just remind you very briefly that January's live event will be on Wednesday 11th at 8 p.m. and that will be the sports psychology and visualization talk that I held over from November. I do hope a few of you do book that up because I think you will find it absolutely fascinating how we can use the science behind this thinking in sport to apply to our own sport of riding motorcycles. So that's Wednesday the 11th of January. That's at 8 p.m. and the tickets will cost £5. The link to book those up is up in the preamble, but I will just pop it up once more on screen in the comments so everybody can see it. There it is. Right, so on with the news. Well, the first story is a rather distressing one. A 42-year-old man has admitted killing a motorcyclist in what was described as a random and unprovoked attack by deliberately colliding with the rear of his motorcycle. Now, the event happened on the B3089 in the village of Dinton in West Wiltshire last year on December the 22nd, shortly before 7:30 p.m. And on the night of the crash, dash cam footage from the vehicle involved showed one Paul Barrett driving through the village of Dinton a number of times, reaching speeds up to 80 miles per hour, despite it being a 30 zone. Detective Chief Inspector Simon Child from the Major Crime Investigation Team said the killing of Ryan Brindley appears to have been an entirely random and unprovoked incident. When we were able to watch the dash cam footage from the car Barrett was driving, it was clear he was driving around the Dinton area and then changed the direction to follow Ryan when he spotted his motorcycle. So he turned round and he followed Ryan Brindley, 43, driving at high speed to catching up, first following him, then ramming him from behind in his car. He fell off the bike and he was later pronounced dead at the scene. Barrett was arrested and taken to hospital for assessment before he was taken into police custody. DCI Child continued, "We do not believe they were known to each other or that there had been any previous interaction between the pair. It seems that Ryan was targeted entirely at random." Barrett of Mere pleaded guilty to manslaughter by reason of diminished responsibility at Winchester Crown Court, and he will be sentenced next month. Now, for all people who take an interest in the quality of their motorcycle clothing, something that many of us have become much more aware of with the A, AA and AAA CE standards, a guide to designing and manufacturing motorcycle PPE has just been released in Australia. Now, it's been written by Chris Hurren, Paul Varnsry and Liz de Rome for the Institute for Frontier Materials at Deakin University, which is in Geelong in Victoria. The document was actually funded by Road Safety Victoria and Transport for New South Wales, and it has had technical support from quite a number of additional experts. Now, basically, the document attempts to explain the difference between effective and ineffective motorcycle PPE does not have to be an expensive one. It can simply be a matter of design and technique, and the document will aim to provide manufacturers with zero cost information that is provided from science-based research to help them construct clothing that's not just effective in its role as PPE, but is also comfortable and waterproof, and it will undoubtedly be of interest for many riders to read it too. Now, the official launch was due to have taken place on Thursday last week at Deakin University, but that release has taken or was postponed because one final reviewer could not meet the deadline. So the launch will take place in January, and that's when I will have a look at the guide when it's fully released, and I will talk hopefully with Chris and possibly with Paul too about how it will change bike kit design. So interesting stuff there. Right, Kevin says he's going to book the visualization talk. Thank you, Kevin, very kind of you. Now, you'll also know that over the last few months, I have been talking about the anti-motorcycle stance of Hackney Council. It can't be described as anything else. They want bikes off their roads. And frankly, lukewarm support at governmental level for motorcycles. And that's in complete contrast to the approach of the Directorate General for Traffic, the DGT, in Spain. Now, many cities in Spain allow motorcycles to use bus and taxi lanes, like some do here. But now the DGT has suggested introducing traffic lanes exclusively for motorcycles in the Catalan city of Barcelona, with a view to them being rolled out across the country if successful. Now, around 1 in every 10 vehicles in Spain is a scooter or a motorcycle, and data for the first half of 2022 shows that 86.3% of those seriously injured in traffic accidents are, in fact, operators of powered two-wheelers. Now, the proportion is even higher in Barcelona, where they actually make up around 1/3 of all vehicles on the road. And Barcelona Town Hall believes that motorcycles are a great mode of transport in cities. They take up little space when parked, they consume less fuel, and they offer flexibility to riders. Now, the head of the DGT, who is Pere Navarro, he recently signed an agreement with Barcelona City Council, which aims to tackle the high injury rate for motorcyclists. And one of the possible solutions is to create motorcycle-only traffic lanes. He said, we need to reflect and think about a possible redistribution of space to adapt to the new circumstances. Now, Vigo was the first city in Spain. I believe that's up in the northwest corner, if my geography is correct. They were the first city to create motorcycle-only lanes back in 2015, and they have the greatest concentration of them anywhere in Spain at the moment. Madrid also has a motorcycle-only lane, but it's a pilot project. So the city of Barcelona and the DGT will be collecting data for analysis to see whether they think motorcycle-only lanes would benefit the Catalan capital. They will also look at training. They will also look at other safety campaigns. And they will also investigate how motorcycles are used for jobs like ride sharing, how they're ridden by commuters, the impact of tourists in the city, and also, of course, by delivery riders. Now, the agreement also includes the introduction of technical innovations, which includes the use of airbags for motorcyclists. That is something that the DGT considers essential. And Navarro did announce that police motorcyclists will start using the vests across Spain next year. So it's hoped the data will identify places too with high accident rates, and that would allow for improvements, something they could do to perhaps to improve visibility as motorcyclists, as well as improve separations between roads and bike lanes. And that's the point at which the exclusive lanes for motorcyclists would come in. So that is a big step forward, I think, a very unusual step when we see motorcyclists mostly getting the thumbs down here in the UK. Now, don't forget the if you have comment, question, anything you want to ask, I will get back to you if I can during the show. If I can't, I'll certainly get back to you at the end of it. So do drop your comments here. I'm always interested in feedback in these shows as well. Tell me, what do you think about the stories that I've covered during the course of the show? Now, next story, RoadPeace. It's a national charity. It's works with road crash victims in the UK. It was founded in 1992, and basically it supports people affected by road crashes. They don't like the word accident, with emotional and practical support and advocacy, and they offer a helpline and practical support for anybody who needs it. But when I see that it's just been announced that it's partnering with Uber to support cyclists, riders and drivers who have been involved in crashes whilst working for the company, I can't but help think of the horse that's already legged it from the stable. Now, Uber arrived as a app-based ride-sharing scheme in 2012, and they subsequently branched out, as you probably know, into food delivery. They're now operating in more than 40 towns and cities across the UK. They have an estimated 70,000 drivers and riders using their platform. Now, under the partnership, Uber drivers and riders and cyclists will be provided with access to RoadPeace's specialised support helpline. And RoadPeace say they're very pleased to be working with Uber as part of their campaign, quote, against society's tolerance of road death injury. Uber says the safety of riders and drivers who use our platform every day is a fundamental priority. The important partnerships we're announcing are the latest step in our drive to make city streets across the UK safe for everyone. Well, if that's the aim, then surely you want to make the city streets across the UK safe. You prevent the crash from happening in the first place. So RoadPeace, in my opinion, could make a useful contribution by starting at a suggestion that Uber stop employing learner motorcyclists on L plates for their delivery jobs. Bolting the stable door springs firmly to mind to me. I'd be interested to hear what you think about that, actually. Now, something about motorcycles, and Triumph here in the UK are apparently working on a new testing program for sustainable fuels at their R&D facility in Hinckley. Now, the project is a partnership with Dorna. You'll probably know they are the organising body behind the MotoG Championship, and what they are working towards is E40 fuel for the Moto2 World Championship for the season after next, so 2024. And the intent is actually to make a full transition to E100, which will basically be ethanol, by 2027, with work going into ensuring the new fuel shows no drop in performance. Now, I'm sure you know, Triumph are the sole engine supplier to Moto2, with the 765cc three-cylinder racing engine delivered to the teams in the series being based on their road-going street triple. Now, Triumph's Steve Sargent, he's their chief product manager, told Motorcycle News, quote, ultimately, our aim is always to take the learnings we gain from racing to make our road bikes even better, which of course encompasses not just performance, but also their impact on the environment. So in theory, at least, Triumph could be doing the groundwork for a road engine that is capable of running entirely on ethanol. And whilst that might meet a carbon neutral condition, if ethanol was sourced from biomass, for example, it wouldn't actually be tailpipe zero in terms of emissions, as the bikes will still produce NOx, which means that they wouldn't meet the upcoming ban on tailpipe emission bikes. Now, the intent, according to the press release, is to release the to ensure the new fuel standard is not only competitive, but will also continue to deliver exciting triple-powered, torque-rich, record-breaking performance that riders love. Now, there's just one problem here in attempting to match the performance of a petrol engine bike, and that is that ethanol is less energy dense. In other words, per litre, you get less energy out of a litre of ethanol when you burn it than you would get out of the equivalent litre of gasoline. And in fact, a 98% ethanol will actually burn and produce around 30% less energy than the equivalent volume of standard petrol. Now, in theory, you could simply burn more fuel in the same time to get more energy, but that, of course, would require a bigger fuel load to travel the same distance at the same speeds. And basically, since there's obviously a limit to how much fuel a bike can physically carry in a petrol tank. There are possible alternatives. You may be able to add extra tanks, but that would also add extra weight, and then of course the mass of distribution of the bike changes more significantly as the fuel level goes down. If you didn't add the extra fuel, it would mean a shorter range for a road bike, but it would also presumably mean shorter races. MotoGP bikes, for example, already pretty much on the limit as far as fuel load is concerned for each race, and they have to tweak the power output of the machine to actually match the circuit. Or it could mean introducing pit stops and refueling. Now, that's something that MotoGP have avoided in the past, largely because of the volatility and flammability of gasoline. But ethanol is less flammable than petrol. It can also be extinguished with water rather than having to be covered with foam. So it could be argued there's a lower risk of fire in the first place. So could we end up seeing endurance race pit stops? It would be intriguing if we did. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. Now, you may recall too that Triumph have recently demonstrated their TE1 electric sports bike prototype, but there's apparently no plans to put that bike into production as it stands at the moment. It's purely a development machine. But you may remember that Triumph purchased the OSET brand, which specialized in battery-powered low-capacity off-roaders. Now, Steve Sargent also told MCN, in a line which almost seems to have slipped MCN's attention, a lot of the guys who've been working on the TE1 are moving on to our production electric vehicles. Notice that term, production electric vehicles. We have bikes on the drawing board now that the guys are starting to develop. So it does look like Triumph are moving rapidly towards an electric motorcycle of some sort. Now, when we park a motorcycle, we do tend to assume that it's going to stay where we left it, and it will be there when we come back to it. Tea leaves, of course, permitting. But this Royal Enfield 350 appears to have tried to move off by itself. Now, have a watch of this little video clip, which I think you'll find is mildly. So as you can hear, the electric start triggered there, and the bike's rolled forward, fallen off its side stand, and as it fell over, it has caught fire. They obviously got all the other bikes away from it fairly pronto. Yes, that's a rather unfortunate moment for the owner there. Now, it's reported that the bike in question, a Royal Enfield 350 Bullet, had just negotiated a river crossing in the Ladakh area of northern India, where there are a lot of tour firms operating. So it's possible that water in the electrical system caused the short circuit that triggered the electric starter, and presumably once the bike was sort of leaning over on its side at an unnatural angle, presumably fuel then leaked from the tank. If that fell onto the hot pipe, then that could well have led to the motorcycle catching fire. Maybe that wouldn't have happened if it had been alcohol powered. If you want to watch the video clip yourself, it's here on YouTube. It's only a very short one, of course. Let me just get back to that particular. There we go. That should now pop up on both screens. So if you're watching on YouTube or you're watching on Facebook, you should now see that in the comment section. Right, so if you want an electric motorcycle though and you can't afford one, how about converting one? Now that's exactly what an Indonesian aftermarket producer of motorcycle parts says the company has capacity to do, and they say they can convert thousands of motorcycles from traditional ICE engines into electric bikes on a monthly basis. The company now has 150 dealerships across 27 provinces to offer these conversion kits, and they plan to grow to 1,000 locations by June 2023. The CEO says that as they developed this engine swap technology, it started off taking them 3 days to convert a motorcycle to a fully functional electric bike, but now with the kit, they claim it takes them only 45 minutes to swap out the petrol engine and install a 2 kilowatt electric motor into a conventional small bike. Now, in terms of cost, assembling the electric components, fitting them to the bike, completing all the legal paperwork for the new electric motorcycle will cost rupiah 9.65 million. That's the Indonesian currency, and that's around £510 at current exchange rates. So, okay, don't forget, if you want to catch this show, goes out on Wednesdays and Sundays at 11, live on YouTube and on Facebook. And you can always catch up easily on my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK. So set yourself a reminder. I'm still not quite sure what I'm doing on Christmas Day, which is the next show. It may be a short live one, or I may do a recording. I still haven't made up my mind. So I'll no doubt see a few of you on Christmas Day, and if not, then I will no doubt see you on catch up. But anyway, set a reminder, 11 o'clock. Sundays and Wednesdays for 11ses. Now, I've previously mentioned that Harley-Davidson have been working with Hero Motor Corp to bring a lightweight motorcycle to the Indian market, but that bike's due to be launching, it is said, in the first quarter of 2023. But news has emerged now that the US bike manufacturer is going ahead with a pair of sub 500 bikes, which it will develop in partnership with Yang, who are owners of Benelli and QJ Motor. And this is a picture of one of the two bikes. This is the X350. It's the smaller of the pair, and it's fairly close to the design sketches that were apparently shown off in 2019. It's likely to be the 353 motor straight out of QJ Motors SRK 350. That's, as you can see, double overhead cam, water-cooled parallel twin, produces roughly 36 PS, weighs around 195 kilograms, so not that light, but it should give the bike a top speed of about 140 kph, or around 90 miles per hour. Now, the bigger machine, presumably to be called the X500, will be based on the Benelli Leoncini 500, which we've also seen here. Now, that machine is likely to be an A2 learner, an A2 license legal machine. We'll put out around 47 PS, and it's likely to weigh around 207 kilograms, and it's estimated top speed could be around 160 kph, which is about 100 miles per hour. So although the primary markets for the bike is China and the surrounding area of Southeast Asia, the bigger bike would actually provide Harley with a much needed entry model in Europe, and conceivably just possibly in the US too. Right, okay, so we're done with the news, and we're on to the last in my top 10 accidents series, and number one is colliding with emerging cars. Probably no great surprise for you. As we have worked through a whole sequence of different crashes that riders have. Now, I'm sure that it's no big surprise to you to know that we're looking at the collision which results when drivers pull out from the rider's near side into the bike's path. In almost all these collisions, the motorcycle had priority. Most of these accidents happen at relatively low speed in urban areas where they are usually survivable, even if they do sometimes require a stay in hospital. But the fact that the injuries are rarely life-threatening, and we come back to tell our mates about these crashes, partly at least accounts for the notoriety of the accident. It's not simply the fact that it is the most common crash of all. But what's rather less well known is that many out-of-town smidsies happen too, and these are often fatal. So the riders who've had them don't come back to tell their mates. And in Essex, for example, fatal junction crashes are actually a leading cause of death, thanks to some motorcycle favourite high-speed roads, which have a horrible selection of blind junctions partway down them. Now, not surprisingly, given the frequency of these crashes, junction collisions have been the subject of a lot of research by scientists over the last 40 or 50 years. Now, initially, much of it focused on the fact that the driver claimed not to see the bike, which is why the crash actually has the colloquial name of Smidsy. Sorry, mate, I didn't see you. Now, that did bring about one positive change here in the UK, in as much that riders were no longer taught to ride in the gutter where they were easily hidden from view. That was the case right up into the 1970s. Go check an old highway code and you'll say it says that a motorcycle should be a metre or so out from the curb. But one of the knock-on effects of this was that it was also held that motorcyclists should make themselves easier to see by using high-vis clothing and day riding lights. And in my opinion, that has encouraged motorcyclists to have a very unhealthy belief that these conspicuity aids actually make riders easier to spot. Now, fellow instructor, or at least former instructor and bike safety researcher Malcolm Palmer noted some years ago that he said, quote, most SMIDCs happen in urban situations when the bike is traveling at 30 or under. The at-risk zone is just 3 seconds long. If someone doesn't see a bike and rider 3 seconds away, it's not because of a lack of high vis. Now, that's absolutely correct. Not that long ago, I watched as a rider took evasive action as a car pulled out. He nearly made it. He just lost his balance at the last moment, toppled over sideways. I stopped, helped him pick himself from the bike up, and he looked accusingly at the driver, who was still sat behind the wheel, staring at the bike lying on the ground. And he turned around and said to me, "He must have seen me. I had my lights on." Well, clearly the driver had not seen that particular motorcycle. Now, it's worth pointing out that the Smithy accident happens anywhere cars and powered two-wheelers coexist. And it doesn't seem to matter how good training is, how rule-bound drivers are, how safe the vehicles themselves are. Go anywhere you like in the world, go to the UK, go to Europe, go to Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Training standards are generally fairly high in all these countries. But the same accidents happen in the US, where training standards are relatively low, but laws are strictly enforced. And if you head off to Thailand, you will find exactly the same SMIDCs, where there's no training, the roads are free for all, and vehicle standards are virtually non-existent. So it argues that it's a human factors problem, and this is where the more recent research has actually started to look. Now, I have covered many of the issues extensively here on Science of Being Seen, so I'm not going to go into detail now. If you want to find out more about the SMIDC crash and the "sorry mate, I didn't see you" problem, then what I suggest you do is sign up for the next full version of the Science of Being Seen, which will be in April, if I'm not entirely mistaken. So here, though, is a quick summary. First of all, the visual system filters the information the eye is passing to the brain, which means we're not always going to be aware of what is theoretically in plain sight. A lot of objects just go missing. The brain misinterprets information because it can be fooled by the relative sizes into miscalculating speed differentials. So when drivers look at a car and they look at a bike side by side, they miscalculate the time to collision with the bike. The brain can focus on particular vehicles and misinformation that should warn it of other vehicles around it. So a driver looking for cars will perceive the absence of cars, but not necessarily pick up the presence of a motorcycle. There was one fascinating experiment where drivers were tasked with either looking for motorcycles when they missed buses, or looking for buses when they actually missed fewer motorcycles. So, and then we have human behavior. We learn to take shortcuts at work because they're energy saving for the brain. The brain is very energy intensive. That's why we get tired very quickly. So we use shortcuts which generally work. So one of the things we learn very quickly on the road is that looking for gaps is actually a pretty efficient strategy. We tend to pick up the vehicles then in peripheral vision. Unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't work for motorcycles, and occasionally it doesn't work for bigger vehicles either. Memorably, I was on the Isle of Man electric tramway when a driver pulled out straight in front of it. Now, many also collisions could have been avoided, though, had the rider thought about the possibility of a vehicle emerging and responded promptly. The 3-second cutoff that I talked about a moment ago, that Malcolm mentioned, is way past the point at which we could stop on the bike. We can stop easily within that 3-second buffer zone if we're ready to stop. But the fact is that many riders, when they are 3 seconds away from a car, actually fail to stop because they're simply not expecting it. So crashes also two to tangle. It takes the driver perhaps to set up the crash, but it also takes the motorcyclist not to see what's coming to ride into it. So basically, the most important thing is that we don't wait till we see an emerging vehicle. We actually need to identify anywhere a vehicle could emerge. So we need to spot things like driveways, access roads, petrol stations, side turnings. We need to recognize the clues: dropped curbs, gaps in buildings, gaps between parked vehicles, gaps in a hedge. They are all places where vehicles could possibly come out. We need to spot road signs and paint markings. If the normal broken line down the white line down the middle of the road suddenly turns into the long paint markings and the short gaps, that's the hazard line. Have a look, see what the hazard is. It may be a side turning. Until you look, you won't know. Road signs, of course, if there is a road sign there, well, it's a bloody good clue that there is a junction. And if you can't see the junction that the sign is warning you about, anticipate that it's blind. It's not rocket science, it really isn't. And of course, a tractor can pull up just about anywhere. And then we need to do something proactive about it. Slowing down, covering the brakes, reduces stopping distance. Lower speeds make it easier to swerve. If we drop back from a vehicle ahead, we get a better view. If we move towards the center of the lane, away from a junction on the near side, we would get a better view in, and the driver would have a better chance of seeing us too, see and be seen. There are many times the rider puts themselves in a dangerous position because they haven't considered being seen by the other road user. Something like 1 in 5 of all crashes at junctions happen when the driver doesn't see the bike coming. And then we basically need to be primed to take evasive action. If we haven't seen a problem, we won't be ready. But if we expect high vis and day riding lights to stop the driver in their tracks too, then we still won't be ready to take that evasive action. And then we're not on the ball. And that is where the 3 seconds comes in, because it can take us a couple of seconds from the moment we realize that a car is starting to pull out to the moment we actually do something about it. We have to process that information ourselves in our brains, and we have to recognize what's going on, work out what we're going to do about it, and then go ahead and do it. And that 3 seconds is basically where we came in with that inability of motorcyclists to stop in a space that in fact was thoroughly adequate had the rider been alert to the problem. It's easy to blame drivers for junction collisions, but really, if we don't avoid one, we need to turn the spotlight the other way and look at how we responded to it. Right, that is it for today. I know that's slightly critical of motorcyclists generally, but it is a way of changing the way we see ourselves as we ride, changing the way we think of other people, as instead of being idiots, just think of them as people like ourselves who occasionally make mistakes. Right, okay, that's pretty much it for today. Kevin says it looks a bit like an old XS 650. I'll just put the picky back up. Well, yes, I can see vaguely where you're coming from. It's slightly flat tracky, isn't it? So with the humpy tank in front, yes, okay, I see where you're coming from on that one. Right, okay, so as I say, that's it for today. Thank you very much indeed for looking in if you were here live. I hope you enjoy the show later if you look in on catch up. We will be, as I say, I'm still wondering what to do about Christmas Day's show, but if I don't see you live, do have a very joyous Christmas for yourselves, and I will see you in the show immediately after Christmas if I don't see you live on Christmas Day. So thanks again for looking in, and if you are out there today, it's brightened up a little bit after a sort of dodgy start. Oh, one thing I was going to mention is do keep an eye on the weather forecasts. There are a range of different weather forecasts at the moment, some of which are predicting snow on Boxing Day, so do keep an eye on that if you are traveling. Be careful and think very much about whether or not a motorcycle is a good way of transport, because we all want to stay shiny side up.